The Apostle John, also known as the beloved disciple, was one of the most fascinating figures in Christian history. The son of Zebedee and Salome and the brother of James, John was born into a family of fishermen in the region of Galilee. Early on, he showed a fiery temperament and a passionate nature, traits that led Jesus to nickname him and his brother James the sons of thunder. John was one of the first disciples called by Jesus. He left everything behind, his boat, his nets, his sense of security, to follow the Master. But what really set him apart among the 12 apostles was his closeness to Jesus. John was present during pivotal moments like the Transfiguration, the Last Supper, and, perhaps most profoundly, at the foot of the cross, where Jesus entrusted him with the care of Mary, his mother. Beyond his unwavering loyalty, John left a profound spiritual legacy. He's the author of the Gospel of John, which portrays Jesus as the embodiment of love and truth. He also wrote 3 letters, known as the Epistles of John, which highlight the significance of Christian love, as well as the Book of Revelation, a powerful and symbolic vision of the end times. John serves as an example of someone who, despite his human flaws, allowed God to shape his life. From a fiery young man, he became a spiritual leader, full of love and compassion. He's proof that when we surrender to God's purpose, we can leave an eternal impact. Imagine this: the Roman Empire at its peak, ruled by an emperor who demands to be worshipped as a god. For Christians, it was a time of danger and relentless persecution. During the reign of Domitian in the late 1st century, staying faithful to Jesus was, quite literally, a death sentence. It was in this climate of intense persecution that the Apostle John faced one of the most unforgettable moments of his life. Refusing to worship the emperor and boldly proclaiming that Jesus Christ alone is Lord, John was arrested and brought to the Colosseum, the epicenter of brutal and bloody spectacles. There, in front of a roaring crowd, he was sentenced to what seemed like certain death, being thrown into a vat of boiling oil. Now let's pause for a second to think about what that really means. Boiling oil is one of the most deadly substances imaginable. Being exposed to it would mean suffering fatal burns in just seconds. That's exactly what they expected to happen. John would be consumed by the oil in front of everyone, a grim warning to anyone daring to defy Rome's power. But then something extraordinary happened. John was thrown into the vat, and nothing happened, absolutely nothing. He came out of the boiling oil without a single scratch, not a single burn, completely unharmed. Was it a miracle? For the Christians who witnessed it, there was no doubt. It was undeniable proof of God's power and divine protection for those who remain faithful. This story echoes other miraculous accounts in the Bible, like that of the 3 Hebrews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were thrown into a fiery furnace for refusing to bow to a golden statue. Just like them, John was spared from a cruel fate because his purpose on earth wasn't finished yet. So what does this mean for us today? Sure, you're probably not facing a literal vat of boiling oil, but how many times does life put us in situations that feel just as unbearable, moments when everything seems lost? This story reminds us that even in the most extreme circumstances, God is with us. He sustains us, protects us, and leads us through the fire. So let me ask you, what's the boiling oil you're facing right now? Is it financial struggles, a broken relationship, an inner battle you can't seem to win? Remember this: if God could protect John through such a brutal trial, he can also give you the strength and deliverance you need in your battles. After miraculously surviving the vat of boiling oil, John wasn't set free. Nope, instead, he was exiled to the island of Patmos, a remote, barren place in the Aegean Sea. Patmos was basically the Roman Empire's version of a prison for dangerous criminals. And there John faced a completely different kind of struggle: isolation. Patmos wasn't just a physical prison, it was emotional and spiritual too. John was cut off from his community, his mission as a preacher, and seemingly from everything that gave his life meaning. The conditions were rough. No comforts, forced labor, and the heavy weight of exile. For most people, it would have felt like the end of the line, but for John, it became a turning point. It was on Patmos, in the midst of that silence and loneliness, that John had one of the most powerful experiences of his life. The revelation of the book of Revelation. God used that moment of hardship to speak directly to him, giving him visions that would shape Christian faith for centuries to come. Think about it. While the world saw John as just another prisoner, isolated and forgotten, God saw an instrument for his eternal message. Patmos, the place meant to be John's defeat, turned into the location of his greatest spiritual triumph. And that's exactly what God does. He turns our suffering into purpose, our isolation into revelation, and our losses into spiritual gain. So what does this mean for us today? How many times do we feel like we're stuck on our own island of Patmos? Times when we feel isolated, defeated, or like life's just not moving forward. Maybe you're in a season right now where everything feels stagnant, like nothing makes sense anymore. But John's story shows us that God can take even our hardest moments and turn them into something extraordinary. Just like John found his purpose on Patmos by writing the book of Revelation, you too can find meaning in the middle of your struggles. Maybe God's using this season to shape you, to give you a clearer vision, or to prepare you for something amazing that you can't even see yet. So, if you're going through your own Patmos right now, remember this. God's purpose is bigger than any adversity. Even in the darkest places, He's at work in your life. The story of the Apostle John is a powerful illustration of unshakable faith and spiritual resilience. Surviving a vat of boiling oil and finding purpose during exile on Patmos wasn't just a miracle. It was living proof of how trusting in God can sustain us through the toughest situations. But here's the question. How can we apply these lessons to the challenges we face today? Think about the struggles of modern life. Sure, they may not be as literal as a vat of boiling oil or being banished to an island, but they can feel just as overwhelming. Losing a job, dealing with illness, navigating broken relationships, or facing family crises often makes us feel like we're stuck in the fire or stranded on our own Patmos. Yet John's story teaches us that these tough moments can actually become opportunities for spiritual growth. The first lesson: trust in God's plan. When we're hit with adversity, it's natural to ask why. Why is this happening? Why would God allow this? But like John, we need to trust that there's a bigger purpose at play. John could have given up, grown bitter, or lost his faith, but instead he chose to remain faithful, and through that, God did something extraordinary. The second lesson: building spiritual resilience. Spiritual resilience is the ability to stay grounded in faith, even when everything around you seems to be falling apart. And the good news, it's something you can build through daily habits, like prayer, reading the Bible, and staying connected to a faith community. We strengthen our relationship with God and prepare ourselves to stand firm when life gets tough. The third lesson: finding purpose in suffering. Just as John found his purpose on Patmos by recording the visions of Revelation, we too can uncover meaning in our struggles. Often, it's in those darkest, most difficult moments that we become more attuned to God's voice. Ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me through this? How can He use this moment for something greater? Think about people who faced extraordinary challenges and emerged stronger. A cancer survivor who now inspires others. A family that overcame the loss of a loved one and started a foundation to help others in similar situations. These stories show us that even in the midst of immense pain, there's room for renewal, purpose, and even hope. John's resilience inspires us to trust in God and keep pushing forward. His story is a reminder that no matter how big the battle, it will never be bigger than God's power. So if you're facing a struggle today, don't give up. Face it with faith, knowing that God can transform your challenges into blessings. The story of the Apostle John surviving the vat of boiling oil is widely known in Christian tradition. But it's important to point out that this event isn't directly recorded in the Bible. It comes from traditions preserved by the Church. Fathers, like Tertullian, who mentioned this miracle in his writings. And that raises an interesting question. How much should we rely on traditions that aren't found in Scripture? First, we need to understand the value of these traditions. The Bible is the foundation of Christian faith, no doubt about that, but traditions play a big role in preserving the teachings and examples of the early Christians. Stories like John's in the vat of oil aren't just historical accounts. They carry powerful spiritual messages that transcend time. They inspire us to reflect on God's faithfulness and the courage of those who put their trust in Him. At the same time, it's crucial to approach these traditions with discernment. They shouldn't replace the Bible, but rather complement it, helping us better understand how the early Christians lived out their faith in times of intense persecution. More than that, these stories invite us to focus on the core message, faith that overcomes fear and trust in a God who never abandons us. There's also a deep symbolic meaning in John's story, the miracle of surviving the boiling oil, even though it's not in Scripture, points to a bigger truth, God's sovereignty and His ability to intervene in ways that defy human logic. This event symbolizes divine protection for those who stand firm in their faith, a message that's just as relevant today as it was back then. So here's something to think about. Is the miracle itself really the most important part? Or is it John's example of resilience and his willingness to endure any suffering out of love for Christ? The story challenges us to look beyond the details and connect with the heart of the gospel, a living, unshakable faith. The story of the Apostle John is so much more than just a tale of miracles and courage. It's a powerful reminder that God is with us, even in life's most challenging moments. Whether it was the boiling oil or the isolation on the island of Patmos, John showed us that faith can transcend the impossible and turn adversity into purpose. Today we've learned some valuable lessons, trusting in God's plan, building spiritual resilience, and finding purpose in suffering. These truths continue to inspire us to face our own boiling vats and islands with the same unwavering confidence. So now let me ask you, what challenges are you facing today? How can you, like John, allow God to use these moments to shape your life and strengthen your faith? Remember this, no matter how big the battle, God is always bigger. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story and be encouraged. And hey, we've got more amazing videos waiting for you. Just click on the screen to watch. May God bless you and give you the strength to face any challenge. See you next time.